Let's talk about the monthly economic report for June 2025. Again, we have these little write-ups, these little summaries in the beginning. They tend to be rather basic, but let's entertain them anyway. Yes, the production value has declined, but it's still at a very high level. So we'll see that in a second. All top 4 sink categories have returned to the levels recorded prior to May. Sinks and faucets are in a very good place. We'll also be talking about that. We may be seeing the first signs of MPI stabilization. Yes, but MPI is still extremely high. Okay, MPI is extremely high. So, let's have a look. And I think it needs to come down more. Like stabilization at this point is not a good sign. Now, let's talk about the actual streams. All right, the actual graphs. Production versus destruction versus mining. Production has come down, but fairly, frankly, it was at a very high level, and it's now back to beginning of the year levels, and that's a good thing. All right, that's fine. It's been growing steadily since 2021. The massacre at M2. If you look at it here, the massacre of M2 was here, and then after that we saw a big replenishment production, and ever since then it's been growing, and that's a very good sign. All right. Especially in null, mining has been growing since 2021. Null sec being this band right here, and it's been steadily growing since about there. Right there. So that's a good thing. Of course, it's a market price index that we're looking at here. So increasing prices will have also an effect on production value. That's just it. Just as a side note. Right? If we look at mining, yes, mining has come down, but we also have to look at the fact that we have 2 large alliances moving right now, right? We have Goons moving from Tenerife's to Innsmother, Brave then from Delph into Tenerife's, and so that means that if we're looking at those regions, there's just not a lot of mining going on, and those are, one of them is the largest or second largest alliance, and the other one is a large alliance, and so that just means that we're going to be seeing increased mining numbers in the future, and also it's July, typically the lowest activity month, and so we're going to see we're going to see, I think, record mining levels again, over 2 trillion a day, very soon. High sec mining has been going down proportionally, right? Fairly consistently, and we are seeing more mining in low sec though. So if we look at the mining graph down here, you can see that on it, that's the destruction, right? Oh, we're seeing this month we saw a higher proportion in null sec. That was more this month. That's not a long-term trend though. Let's look at destruction. So destruction also especially high in low sec. That's this proportion right here. If you see the destruction, so we've had some large battles going on in low sec, and overall numbers keep creeping up. We have the highest destruction levels since 2021, since M2, and so that's also a very good thing. And yes, also that the destruction level also dependent on market pricing, so take it all with a grain of salt. But overall, these metrics for July or for June, it's a fairly good situation to be in, right? There's nothing. We've been in way worse situations in the last few years, so that's mostly good news. If we look at these indicators by region, I typically don't look at this, as you guys know. Let me see if I can show you guys like this. I typically don't look at these, but I want to take the opportunity, since we're seeing a lot of movement in nullsec, to show you guys how to read this if you never look at this, right? So you can see the destruction value here, the mining value here. For example, you can see here fountain, that's the initiative, mining a metric shit ton, and then typically you have Veil of the Silence down here. Very similar numbers. Oh my god, identical numbers. Look at that, 2.95 versus 2.94. That is fraternity. And so those are the alliances that are not moving right now, and they are busy mining. But what you can also see here is the export and import numbers. So, for example, Immensia or Immensia, however you want to say that. Lots of imports, lots of exports, because as I just said, we have alliances moving in and out, and then also large numbers in Insmother here, only on the import side as goons are moving in. So on this graph, you can see who goes in and who goes out, where the action is, etc., etc. Higher Brand says, I just use the Power BI once that mysterious benefactor updates it. Yeah, for sure. He did. Matthew has updated it, and we're gonna jump in it in a second as well. And there he is. It's updated now. That's right. Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate your work, Matt. Ore mined, still in a good place. After the March update, we saw mining numbers increase, and it's stayed that way. If we look at where it's mined, Fountain, absolute top in asteroids. Gas volume, mostly from wormholes. That's always been like that. It's going down slightly in all other places, but also wormholes have been wormhole gas, and gas overall has been rather nerved in its use. Then we have ice, pretty much unchanged, and this is where the interesting graph comes in, and this is moon materials by source. And so there are a few things we can read from this. One, Metanox moon mining proliferation is still massive, right? There's still the implementation and use of Metanox moon mining is still huge, and the manual moon mining part is going down rather rapidly, especially in R4 and R8, which have dropped in price by 50 to 60% and are thus not very profitable to mine anymore. I want to go to Matt's Power BI, since we're talking about him anyway, because he actually has a good graph of looking at it. Let me just see. Moon mining. We can look at moon mining like this. Look at this. What you can see here down there is the distribution of, so the overall moon mining quantity right here, and you can see the distribution between the dark green, which is Metanox, and the turquoise, or whatever the color is refinery, manual moon mining. And so overall, you can see the amount of moon mining going down. So okay, it's summer, I don't know, whatever to read into it. But also what you can definitely see is that the refinery, the manual part, is definitely shrinking. So overall, we have a much higher proportion coming from passive moon mining, which is one of the reasons why CCP can't get the pyrite price down. Even with the last patch that they did, pyrite prices are still high, and that they're just not going to come down unless there's a shift back to manual moon mining in R4 and R8 moons, or especially R4 moons, or there's a bigger change than the last patch that had a slight refinery update, refinement number insert the English word for it. So that's certainly an issue that we're seeing, and something that where we're probably not done implementing changes, because I think the as good as nullsec might find Metanox moons, there are massive advantages of ships being in space and actually mining stuff in terms of content and fun. And so, certainly probably not the end of the Metanox journey there. Who's doing the most moon mining? Fraternity, followed by the initiative. As long as Goons and Brave are busy moving. But you can see the highest percent of Metanox is actually coming from Syndicate and Fountain and Scalding Pass. They have the highest amount of. Angry Mustache contended that the pyrite shortage is more than people don't mine Bistot Arcanor anymore, but that might be self-interested argument. Well, it's multi-layered, but certainly the last change hasn't had a big impact yet because prices went back up again this week. I want to talk about sinks and faucets, as always. So let's look at the money supply. Okay, we had faucets of 146 trillion, sinks of 136 trillion, and an active IS delta. Careful here. Matt and I stumbled over this. It says 750, but it's billion, not trillion. This is a terrible way to label it. CCP, if you're watching, please say it all in trillion. There's no way you're not gonna miss this. Matt and I both thought, holy shit, what is going on with the active IS delta? But I can show you better on Matt's Power BI. And so, oh wait, can you guys see this? There you go. So this is the active IS delta over time. The active IS delta meaning people returning from inactivity or going inactive. So after 3 months, their ISK leaves the system in terms of counting it for the money supply in EVE Online. That's just a decision that CCP has made for this report. Plus bot bans. And so you can see that in most months, there's a slight reduction of ISK from this. In some months, you have massive increases. Most of that is either goons moving, for example, and resubbing like it was last October, or a free Omega, or an expansion, or a combination of those. That's typically when we have a positive ISK delta. If we're looking at faucets, so the money that's coming into EVE Online, we see that in June, there's a clear trend from December, which is always the high point. And it's been steadily going down, which is a good thing because we had a serious money supply issue in EVE Online. I'm going to give you a few stats to underscore that argument, all right? So faucets been steadily going down, and sinks are in a very good place, considering that June, considering that we've been back to the original sales tax of around 7-8% since the March patch. So since March, sinks have been increasing, sucking ISK out of the system, which is a good control for prices to keep them down. If we look at the overall money supply, then we have a slight increase, and so this is what I mean by let's look at the money supply overall. In most months, you see a positive money supply impact, so more ISK going into the system than going out. as long as you have a growing player base, this is not an issue because you have more ISK, more players, fantastic. The thing is, if you compare it to the beginning of this graph, we have a lot fewer players than we did in January of 2021, for example. Let's see, I'll show you on this graph. If we're going to the money supply graph right here, right? I want to zoom out so you guys can see the whole graph. I'm going to do it like this so you guys can see it. Oh my goodness, I hate this. God. Where'd you go? Whatever. We're gonna do it like this. It doesn't work. If you have a trillion ISK and you merely log on, is your ISK active now? Yes, it is, Higherbrand. All you have to do is log on. Right now, so since 2022, the money supply has been increasing rapidly in EVO 9. And yes, we have more players now than we did in 2022, but we certainly don't have many more players now than we did have in the beginning of 2021. So essentially, the money supply from 2021 to now has almost doubled, and the amount of players has reduced. There's no way that doesn't have a price impact. The only way that doesn't have a price impact is if the ISK is just lying around and nobody's using it. So if you're just logging on and you're leaving your ISK in place, it has no impact on the economy, just potential purchasing power for you. And the way we measure that is this, right, is ISK velocity. So ISK velocity measures exactly that. Is the ISK actually being used? But from 2021 to now, there's actually not been a huge change in ISK velocity either, right? So before that, yes, we had a higher ISK velocity, so so that you could achieve possibly the same results from this. But if you're complaining about high prices, don't only look at the availability of raw materials, right? It's much more also a function of the ISK in game. So the reason I'm telling you that is just because for you to understand the many different factors that CCP has to deal with in organizing this economy, and that is the reason why I always advocate for more control on the ISK supply side and more rigor on the ISK sink side. Because in the past, what CCP has tried to do a lot of times is fix the anger about scarcity with more ISK supply, and that is a very short-term fix. It doesn't work, right? It's like during COVID when governments just printed money and threw money at the people to make them happy, but in turn that caused inflation and just made everything more and more expensive and didn't change anything at all. All right. Faction war dudes are trying their hardest to make the game interesting for new players. However, nullseckers do things like sit scared on gates and vulture fleas. Okay. The issue here, I imagine, is that the players bringing the ISK in bounties is very different from the players taking the ISK out in taxes. So absolutely. Oh my god, we need Millet. Hey, dude. Millet is a fucking criminal and should be in jail, man. What are you talking about? Alright. The issue here, I imagine, is that the players bringing the ISK is very different from... So, yes. Crota, that is correct, but it's not necessarily an issue. So, in essence, it doesn't really matter who brings in the ISK and who takes it out, as long as there's a balance. And the biggest ISK sink as we can see from these graphs right here. Transaction tax is the highest sync in the game. And while, yes, large-scale traders, large-scale traders are the ones that are sinking a lot of this out of the system, but the transaction tax essentially hits everyone, and so it's a rather fair way to suck stuff out of the system. We discussed it in the past, not necessarily in relation to Plex, because I think then you don't want to double tax people. I think we have some work to do there, but it is one way of sinking a lot of ISK out of the system, and so are skill books, certainly. The bounties are the biggest ISK faucet. It's been steadily going down, but then again, also let's see how the bounties look when goons are actually settling in and riding again. So that number is likely going to be going up. But overall, it's holding the balance, okay. And so last thing we got to talk about is the MPI. And I don't know why this is not working, but we're going to look at it like this. So the MPI right here, it went... Today, all my settings are messed up. I don't know what's going on. Apologies, bear with me. The MPI has dropped significantly, but now it's settled in here, which is still, very high. And I say very high in the context of history. There are two things. There are two things that we can do to manage that. The problem being expensive super capitals. And capitals to some extent, but super capitals specifically. If the BF is active today again, I believe. Well, then we'll see it in the next MER. If you look at our prices expensive for ships and modules, so tier 2 is not expensive right now. Extremely cheap moon materials, right? Extremely cheap morphite. It's getting there, right? Tier 1 is rather expensive with high MPI, but tier 1 ships aren't expensive overall. So, yes, potentially battleships, but they already reduced the blueprint requirements for those. So what's really expensive is super capitals and titans. So one way is reducing material prices overall across the board, but that will hurt miners for sure. It will hurt the profitability of miners. It will, it will have negative effects as well. Let's not ignore these negative effects that reducing mineral prices have, right? The other thing is you could reduce the amount of minerals used in certain ships that you think are more expensive, which would be possibly a more refined way of addressing the issues that we currently have. Because if super capitals are not being built right now because they're not worth it, then they're actually not having a huge impact on the economy at the moment. If you drop mineral prices down overall across the board too far, and then people start building them again, then prices are going to jump up immediately again. If we drop the requirements for one ship type, then if it becomes feasible again to build them through that change, then immediately also we're going to have increased demand on minerals, and that will also skyrocket prices again. So it's a very fine balance of hitting of considering either increasing the amount of minerals in the system or changing blueprint requirements for certain ship types, and managing all that in a moving economy is not easy, and it's very, very, let's say, scary for CCP to do so in the historical context of Rorqual and Titan proliferation and scarcity. So clearly, I've said this in the past, many times, is that CCP has clearly taken the road of being very, very careful about these changes. I think they've taken the right changes in the right direction. I think they could be a little bit more bold. But that's something that we're working through as a CSM. One thing they have done is they have increased lately the exploration loot side for at least capital ships, if not for supers. So there are some material prices coming down. There are some bottlenecks being relieved, and so possibly we're going to see more changes in the future. I think that's it about the MER, unless somebody has any additional questions. Let's see. Yeah, no, that's it. Okay, then that's the MER, and we're gonna return to the regular stream and do